So we're really pleased to be able to host the team from the AI Standards Hub to come and tell us a little bit about what they've been discussing on standardization and the future of AI assurance. We are delighted that Stacie Hoffman, who is the head of strategic growth and the Department of Data Science and AI at the National Physical Laboratories, is going to be chairing this panel. Stacie specializes in the technical standardization of critical and emerging technologies, and prior to being at NPL, she was the head of digital standards at DCIT. So, thank you to Stacie, and welcome to you and the rest of the panel.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Today with me on the panel, we have Adam Leon-Smith, chair of the AIQI Consortium, Mark Bowden, manager from the Critical Technology Standards section at the Department of Industry, Science and Resources, Australia, Matt Gantly, Chief Executive Officer from the United Kingdom Accreditation Service, also known as UCAS, and Catherine Vigneron, Deputy Director, Standardisation from Senelec. And before we get into the panel discussion itself, I just want to give a brief overview of the discussion that we've been having the last couple of days down at the AI Standards Hub Global Summit. So we've really spent those days looking at the intersection of AI and AI standards and AI governance, including regulation, assurance now on this panel, and the way in which standards help us ensure that we embed our kind of fundamental and human rights in AI. Today we talked mainly about foundation models and what is needed in terms of the good science behind those models. What came really clearly through is that we need very kind of standardized measurement tools to know what we're measuring and why, and how accessibility to those tools is really important, and actually I see standards as one of those things that is an accessible tool for people to help them in their AI development. Diverse stakeholder participation is also something we talked about throughout the course of the last couple of days in terms of the need for diverse stakeholder participation in standards development and what can be so difficult about getting that representation in the room. Very briefly, what are standards? Technical standards are like a set of instructions that set out good practice so that you know how to develop or deploy, test or measure something, in this particular instance, AI. Baroness Jones came and gave a speech, and she said very clearly that standards are like a common yardstick. Roberto Viola from the European Commission mentioned that without standards, the AI Act, but I'm going to expand this to regulation generally, without standards, regulations won't be effective in governing AI. And Thomas Lemanauskas, the Deputy Secretary General for the International Telecommunication Union, mentioned that international collaboration in this space is absolutely critical. And I think all of this brings us together now to talk about the future of assurance and what that means and what that looks like for AI in this panel. So I'm going to start off by asking Adam, what is AI assurance and accreditation, and why are standards important for that?
Thank you. So assurance at its heart is the provision of evidence that certain requirements have been met or will be met in the future. It takes a different meaning in different contexts, but if we think about it in a safety context in particular, or a risky context, then it relies on something called the quality infrastructure. So I represent the AIQI Consortium, which is a global group of organizations that think we should manage responsible and safe AI through the same system that we use for cars, toasters, construction, and everything else. This is called, as I said, the quality infrastructure, and it relies on having an agreed way of doing things, a way of checking that things are done right, and a system for checking the checkers. And these have more formal technical names that some of you might be familiar with. Consensus-based standards, which is an agreed way of doing things. Metrology, which is an agreed way of measuring things. Conformity assessment, which is the way that we check that things have been done right. And accreditation, which is the way we check the checkers, and then finally market surveillance in a regulatory context, which underpins the whole system and makes sure it's all hanging together. If you're familiar with the EU's AI Act, you will recognize all these words from the text because it completely relies on this system. In fact, at one of the opening keynotes, the Director General of DG Connect said there basically is no AI Act without consensus-based standards. It's how we achieve product safety in a regulated way without a huge cost of compliance. This system works together in a really intricate and interesting way, and it forms sort of a quality chain. The quality of the AI we build depends on the quality of the development, which is influenced by the quality of the testing of the developed AI. And this in turn depends on the quality of the conformity assessment processes that are used, which depends on the quality of the conformity assessment bodies that do them, which is ensured by something called accreditation, which one of my other panelists will explain in more detail. It's also called notification in the European Union. And as I said, this all depends on the quality of the underlying market surveillance system. But all of this depends on these consensus-based standards. And these standards have legitimacy because they are built by a very diverse group, and everybody's voice is heard, and a common opinion is distilled, which is then used by this whole system. So that's what the quality infrastructure is, and that's something we've spent the last 2 days downstairs talking about for those of you that have been up here. Basically, without the standards, the whole rest of the system that we use to assure safety in every other field falls apart. So that's why standards are important.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to come to Catherine. What role do different stakeholders play in developing these critical standards, and why is that important?
Thank you, Stacie. Maybe first I will start to explain to the audience who are CEN and CENELEC, because I'm not sure you are all familiar with. So CEN and CENELEC are the European Committee for Standardization. This is CEN, and CENELEC is the European Committee for Electrotechnical Standardization. CEN and CENELEC are recognized by European legislation on European standardization as standards developers in Europe. So we are two membership-based organizations. We have 34 members, which are the national standardization body in 34 countries, which are the 27 EU countries, plus UK, plus Serbia, plus North Macedonia, plus Turkey, plus the 3 EFTA countries. The point is that we are developing standards, and how we are doing that, or we are organizing ourselves. We are organizing ourselves into technical committees. Each technical committee has a very precise scope and is entitled to develop standards, European standards in that area. For instance, regarding AI, we have a CEN-CENELEC joint technical committee, the famous Joint Technical Committee 2021, who is developing standards in support of the AI Act. Now, coming back to your question, Stacie, because this was just to set the scene, the relevance of stakeholders. Within the technical committees, our members have to appoint experts, and it is their duty to look at national level for the broadest representativity possible. They need to look from academia to research to industry to SMEs to government. This is essential. Why is this essential? It's because when they will discuss the content of a European standard at national level, our country will have to bring the national position. So it's super crucial that at national level, all interests are represented. Inclusivity, and openness is really a key principle of European standardization, and we are really paying really attention to that aspect from, let's say, from the headquarters in Brussels, because this is super important. So we count for stakeholders on our members, but we also are building partnership with European federations relevant for a sector. This is super important, and they can bring their views at the level of the CEN and CENELEC Technical Committee. Why is this so important? It's because if we do not have the broadest representativity, if we do not have all the standard users around the table, our standard has less value. So this is super important and critical that all that needs to be there are around the table.
Thank you, Catherine. Next, I'll come to Matt. What role does organizations like UCAS play in assurance, and how do you use standards in your work?
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting us to this very prestigious event. I'd like to give some background, first of all, into what accreditation is and what UCAS is. And we've already heard earlier about the landscape of the quality infrastructure at a national and an international level. But first of all, UCAS. So UCAS is the United Kingdom Accreditation Service. We're the national accreditation body appointed by the UK government to ensure that conformity assessment, as Adam's already highlighted, is undertaken competently, consistently, and impartially. Now, we're appointed into that role by the Department of Business and Trade in the United Kingdom, and we also have counterpart accreditation bodies internationally. There's over 90 accreditation bodies all around the world, and we collaborate and coordinate our activities on an international basis, both at a European level or a regional level across the world, and then at a global level through relevant bodies, IF and ILAC. ILAC are the two bodies that bring together that consistency. Why is that important? Well, it's vital because conformity assessment in particular, or another phrase that's often used as the TIC industry, testing, inspection, certification, verification and validation, they all seem like the same thing, but they have very precise technical definitions, and those technical specifications or definitions come from standards, particularly defined at an ISO level or at a European level through CEN and CENELEC. And so we ensure that those conformity assessment bodies undertake that testing, inspection and certification consistently, impartially and competently. That's for many different areas, from food safety to drinking water, forensic science to pathology testing, and of course now to AI, in the way that AI is developed, the way that it's deployed, the way it's tested. And so we're the ultimate body to ensure that is done effectively, and we are accountable for that to the UK government, and each national accreditation body is also accountable to its relevant national government body. So things are changing significantly because of AI, not just the fact that through the EU AI Act there is a requirement to test and verify and certify the development and the application of AI, but also the very basis of conformity assessment is changing, because through a laboratory test or an inspection of an oil pipeline or the certification of a toy or the verification of data and information relating to corporate sustainability reporting, the digitalization of information and as well the application of AI to evaluate the conformance is changing. And we're seeing an acceleration in the techniques and the methodologies of conformity assessment. And so clear standards that are both agile and innovative and evolve over time based upon what's happening technologically is vital. So we play a very important role in convening and bringing all of that together with the basis of the standards that CEN, CENELEC, ISO, IEC and other relevant bodies provide.
Thank you, Matt. Mark, from a government perspective, what do we need to have a robust assurance ecosystem? We've heard about the national level, the international level, and kind of the standards interplay there.
Thank you, Stacie, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to the Alan Turing Institute for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. A robust AI assurance ecosystem is really important from an Australian perspective, and there's a number of reasons for that. The first is that we are a small to medium-sized country, and we are a net importer of many technologies, including many of the advanced AI capabilities. And more broadly, we're a trading nation that relies heavily on that international system, which is underpinned by technical standards. And so that's where the role of my team within Australia's Department of Industry, Science and Resources comes in. Our role is to coordinate and enhance Australian expert engagement in many areas of critical technology standards development in those international forums. And we do that through coordinating across interested parts of government, including some of the technical agencies, but really importantly with outreach to industry and research experts who are the core of that group who are representing Australia in these international forums. And finally, as a small to medium-sized country, we're working really closely with international partners to ensure that we're working in concert in a really coordinated way to help support that international system. From an AI assurance perspective, governments are in a really unique position because we are ultimately end users of many of these technologies, the products and services, but also we're often investing in building those capabilities domestically, and usually will be the regulator as well. And so we touch a number of different parts of that assurance ecosystem, and it's really critical that it's functioning really effectively so that we can deliver the outcomes we need for our citizens. In terms of what that robust system needs, I think my colleagues on the panel have done a really good job of articulating the core components. I would only add that it's really critical for those aspects of the quality infrastructure or technical infrastructure to be working in a really coordinated and coherent way so that we have all of those pieces working in concert. The second is to ensure that we're aligning with international developments, and that means working and collaborating with entities like the OECD and other international forums so that we're well aligned across jurisdictions. And finally, for those very rare cases where there may be a need to tailor or customise for domestic purposes, that we're doing it in a really targeted and specific way, again, to be able to deliver those outcomes. Very briefly, in terms of where Australia is at in that process, I think like many countries, we're actively in the process of developing our AI assurance frameworks. We do have a national AI assurance framework that's been agreed by the state and territory jurisdictions within the Australian government, and they're looking to comply with that framework in terms of implementing AI within their various jurisdictions. Second, in September last year, government released a proposals paper on mandatory guardrails, but with a focus on high-risk applications for AI. And we've consulted extensively, a lot of industry and stakeholder roundtables there, and we've had lots of submissions into that process. So government is currently working through their responses as they look to finalise that process on mandatory guardrails. But certainly we can say that it will look to link heavily with international technical standards, in particular ISO IEC 42001, but certainly across an array of those areas. And that goes back to my point earlier around that international alignment. And finally, we've also released a voluntary AI safety standard. And I should clarify, that's not a technical standard that we might see from the international SDOs. Think of it more like a set of guidelines, but it's geared towards developers and deployers of AI technologies, and it helps to provide them with a series of essentially guidance on how to do that in a way that's really safe and responsible, and also provides a bridge from that kind of current state through to potential mandatory requirements in the future. Thanks, Stacie.
Thank you. Before we go much further, because you mentioned the ISO 42001, I thought maybe, Adam, could I come to you very quickly to talk about what that is and give context for those that might not be familiar with it?
So ISO IEC 42001 is a management system for the responsible development or use of AI systems. You might be familiar with ISO IEC 27001 for information security or other management systems for, say, environmental management. It's very much about ensuring that an organization has those clear basic practices in place to identify its context, identify regulatory and other needs, to do relevant risk and impact assessments and put in place controls to mitigate those risks. It's an international standard, and it's really important here that we do recognize that international standards, putting international standards first, is absolutely key to free trade and global interoperability. So there is a lot of focus on trying to make sure that ISO IEC standards are really good, and that's where the UK in particular puts a lot of effort in.
Thank you. So I think this has set the scene really well and provided context for us all. And I'm hearing kind of two things come out. One is we need the effective functioning of this ecosystem, which has a lot of different players, standards developers, accreditors, the checkers for the checkers. But at the same time, the way in which we evaluate, our evaluation methodologies are either maybe non-existent at this time or they're evolving. And so that brings us down to we really, really need to get to that, the science of measurement, which is what kind of NPL focuses on, and as do other researchers. So with all of this kind of movement in the ecosystem, does that mean that we need a different approach to assurance or standards in the AI space than we have had previously? And I will open up to anyone who wants to take this one.
I think AI, as we've heard a lot like this week, is uniquely multidisciplinary. Within the European Standardisation Initiative, we have fundamental rights or human rights being tackled in consensus-based standards for the first time ever. So absolutely, we need a different set of people. Data scientists aren't necessarily experts in trade-offs in human rights law. There's also other disciplines. There's things like ethicists and social scientists that have a part to play in managing the societal impact of AI. So I think there's definitely different stakeholders, but then you could say there's probably also different stakeholders involved in construction standards as well. So I think probably every technical committee in a standards group has a completely different set of standards. But what I think is really notable in AI is the involvement of human rights experts.
Matt,
Will the approaches change? Definitely, yes. That is true. Not just because what we're accrediting, testing, inspecting, or certifying, or verifying is changing, because we're seeing not just whether the product, such as a toy, has met a technical specification, but the software or the artificial intelligence that's integral to the product itself or the service itself is changing. And so our understanding of that conformity and how that artificial intelligence is evolving over time, we're learning all the time for that. So our approaches will change, and Adam put it very effectively there. As conformity assessment has moved over history, because conformity assessment has existed for over 200 years, from railway lines to pressure vessels. And so we've moved over time into many different forms of conformity assessment. So as we move into this new era of artificial intelligence, yes, of course, we will develop new standards, new methodologies, new approaches, and especially ensuring that we have the competencies and skills of our humans to be able to evaluate that, and the systems to be able to evaluate those artificial intelligence systems in their deployment, in their use, and in their maintenance. But I'd say that the overall framework of conformity assessment and the relevant standards that come from ISO and IEC are robust and agile enough to be able to be deployed, but we need more guidance and information to help assess how that is applied in practice. But also there's the challenge and the opportunity that conformity assessment itself is changing. In the way that we test a product or we evaluate data that's coming from the in-use application of a product, that will change in the way that we will evaluate whether a product is fit for purpose or not in a laboratory, or its product certification. Also, the use of AI in planning for an assessment, evaluating the conformity for producing a report, or technically reviewing that report. AI in its application is going to change that professional service of conformity assessment as well. So we need more guardrails of how it will be applied in practice. So in short, yes, it's going to change a lot, and it's happening very fast as well. So we must collaborate, and I think what Adam and the team have done with the AIQI is a very effective collaborative initiative of bringing together metrology, standards bodies, conformity assessment, and accreditation bodies to understand where the gaps are and help to develop, or at least pinpoint, connect the dots between where information is on what the solutions are for the future.
Right. It's more of an evolution, less of a revolution, albeit
Definitely.
maybe quick.
Yes.
As with AI.
A very quick evolution.
Catherine.
Yes, I just wanted to react on what Adam said about our European Technical Committee. Indeed, it's one of the, if not the biggest standardization technical committee. So yes, indeed, we need several approaches for different AI approaches. The biggest technical committee, why? It's because we are always inviting, any relevant stakeholders to join forces, because we really need that force. Now, let's be completely transparent with you and with the audience, because I'm not here only to say the very nice things, but there are also some challenges with such a big technical committee. First, it was a new technical committee, so we need to set up the scene, which can take a little bit of time, but we also welcome new experts on a topic that we didn't know from an organizational point of view, but also new experts to standardization. And let's be also very transparent, standardization can be very complex in terms of rules and processes. So of course this also give us, let's say, some hard time, or I don't know whether I should say that, but let's say some, we need also to train our experts, and our members need to train our experts. And that was also an important part of the work at the beginning of the setting up of GTC, Joint Technical Committee 21. Thank you.
Stacie, I think I would echo much of what my colleagues have already articulated, but just to add, I think that theme around agility is going to be really key. What we see as being perhaps low risk in one application may well be high risk in another, and so we're going to need that agility to be able to address those different circumstances. And similarly, in the structures and processes for our standards development and our conformity assessment, we're going to need to get those right so we can really efficiently develop those interventions and systems.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've talked around all the different types of work that needs to happen, but where is this work happening? We've talked a bit about standards organizations, AI, QI. How do people actually get involved? And we've talked about the need for more stakeholders. What does that mean? Where do we go?
So the way the standard system works is the main standards bodies, so ISO, IEC, and CEN-CENELEC, are made up of members which are national bodies. So each country has a national standards body. In the UK, that's the British Standards Institute, BSI, and they have what's called a mirror committee. So we have an AI mirror committee where we sit and look at what's going on in ISO, IEC, and CEN-CENELEC, and we review what's going on, and maybe we decide to send some experts to some meetings to influence the standard. Maybe we decide to send comments to the committee. Maybe we vote on different standards and whether they should stop or whether they should go backwards or go forwards. In each country, there's a similar setup. The rules are different. In the UK, that's free to join, apart from obviously the time you have to spend actually doing the work as an expert. So I'd encourage anybody that wants to participate in international standards to find out who their national standards body is and contact them. I think BSI have a web page where you can type in your details and apply.
Thanks, Adam.
He said it all.
You said it all.
No, I can add that indeed, let's say that the most direct journey to reach European standardization is indeed through the national standardization bodies in all our member countries. But we are also building some partnership with European federations. So it means that if you're part of a European federation through your industry, you can also try to reach CEN-CENELEC. This being said, I said that the main route is through national committees. Why? It's because at national, it's our members, so for instance BSI, who are voting on our draft standards. Partnerships means only observership. But yes, we are always happy if new stakeholders join at national level, yes, of course.
Yeah. And there's some standards bodies as well that don't function with a national committee. So that's one way to do it. And then the other way is if you're another body that has an open engagement, you can go directly to that standards body as well. But yes, I agree that NSBs have great committees that also help upskill people on standards development, which is really important. And what about from the...
Sorry, might just add one comment there, Stacie. I think, again, getting that level of engagement and increasing that sort of many hands make light work contribution to the standard space is really key. But the other thing that's important to keep in mind is particularly for small and medium countries who've maybe got a finite pool of resources, that we're really cautious, that we're not duplicating effort across multiple forums, that we're really clear on the scope of work, and those liaisons and collaborations are well designed so that even those smaller delegations or countries with a smaller resource capacity are still able to contribute effectively as well.
Very good point, thank you. What about from the kind of accreditation and conformity aspect? Is there opportunity to engage there, or what's happening in that space?
Yeah, good, Stacie. I think in particular that is a vital point. We have the international standards or regional standards or national standards for aspects of conformity assessment, but at a very practical level, the methodologies, the standard operating procedures, the things that happen day to day for a test or inspection or certification are changing. particularly because bodies are now deploying or developing AI for those applications, particularly with the digitization, increasing digitization of information, or gathering information from sensors or drones or digital information photography that is then used in conformity assessment in a much more integrated way. That's changing the very basis of which conformity assessment works, and there is not yet enough standardization of those methodologies, and that has to happen. Just for example, the use of OpenAI or ChatGPTs or agents to be able to plan and schedule an assessment, to write an assessment report, to do a technical review, to manage a quality management system within a conformity assessment body, that can all be done in AI systems. But we haven't yet set the guardrails of how conformity assessment bodies should develop, should test, should validate that those systems are working in practice, and demonstrate the logic, because the decisions or the conformity that the test, inspection or certification bodies arrive at can fundamentally affect the trust, the confidence of a product or service that ends up in a marketplace. So we have to get that very practical element right, and collaborators between accreditation bodies and the testing, inspection and certification bodies to make sure that is in place. And AIQI it's one of its core remit is to work on that type of work.
And that's the AI Quality Infrastructure Consortium,
Yes.
correct? Yes. Great, thank you. I just wanted to check if there's any questions from the room. I could go on, but I'll give some opportunity to others as well. I'll check here one more time. Oops. As I close out the app. No? Okay, I'll keep going. Do put a hand. Oh, I see. Actually, I do see one in the back. Thank you.
So, Simon Burton here from the University of York and convener of our ISO Committee on Safety and AI for Automotive. So I'd like the panel's opinion on when we talk about assurance of AI, the systems are becoming more complex. The questions of what is safe or not, or what is correct or not, also becoming more ambiguous. And the potential implications of failures are also very hard to predict as well. So I'd like the panel's opinions on whether or not we're just biting off more than we can chew, and whether current assurance practices and standards are really fit for purpose for the types of threats that we have from these systems.
That's a very good question. I have an answer from the National Metrology Institute perspective, but I'll let the panel speak first if anyone would like to. Shall I go?
Well, if we can't write down how we're going to check that automobiles using AI are safe and demonstrate that we did it, we probably shouldn't be putting them on the market, basically.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And I think this gets back to our kind of conversation around that, the science of measurement, which is what metrology is. So you have a National Metrology Institute. There's hundreds of them around the world. And that's what we do, is we try and answer that exact question of how do we measure for this specific thing? Can we put a number on uncertainty through a very complex system? And that's what we're working with, all international partners representing very similar to what we have on the stage today, trying to understand, okay, where do we need to develop these new methodologies so that we can have an understanding of that risk? And until then, we need to be very mindful about what we are deploying, I think. Yeah. I see one on the right and one towards the middle.
Hi, thanks very much for this talk. My name is Susan. I was going to ask a question about the concept. I keep on hearing this word being used with AI, which is the black box. And my understanding is that it can't be explained, it can't be interpreted. So my question is, where an application has an aspect to it that is a black box, should we be implementing those AI systems, please?
The black box angle when it comes to assurance.
I could have an attempt at answering this question. The role of accreditation is, I've already highlighted, is to ensure that the testing, inspection and certification bodies act competently, impartially and consistently, whatever that aspect of product or the service of which they're evaluating. And this concept of a black box, well, when we evaluate a conformity assessment body now, we're primarily looking to see that the entity, the conformity assessment body, is competent, and we do that through looking at its systems, its procedures, its structures, as well as the competence of the people who are employed to be able to undertake that. And the competence of the people is based upon their training and their education and experience and their application of that conformity assessment over time, and then we see that through records. But with AI, it's intelligent. It's going to be as intelligent as a human, and then more intelligent than a human, and over time. But will we be evaluating the actual coding of the system or the algorithm and the way that it's built up? Mm-hmm. I don't think so. But what we will be asking for is for the conformity assessment body, or those bodies that are using AI in order for that conformity assessment, to demonstrate that that system is competent, demonstrate that in its logic, in arriving at a conclusion, has applied appropriate reasoning, and it can do that consistently over time. So it's almost the same way that we evaluate a human now. The AI has to demonstrate that it's competent to be able to do that and show its reasoning of why it's come to a certain conclusion.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think there's a lot you can evaluate around the black box as well. You can evaluate the input, the training data for quality, appropriateness. You can evaluate the output, the impact that it has, right? There's a lot that you can do around, even if you can't get into that system itself.
Can I add to that? I mean, the reason people talk about these opaque boxes is because neural networks it's very complicated to understand how the different activation functions and exactly why X caused Y. And I kind of understand that concern. If we look at reality, though, in the software world, has every line of code ever been written, been checked and understood by someone else? No. Yes, if we're talking about a nuclear power station, I hope so. Somebody's been and peer-reviewed all that code. But in 90% of cases, no. So demanding that for AI seems quite a high bar. On the other hand, we do need to have a general understanding of how the system works and the parameters in which it's operating. And if we look at the EU's AI Act, that's what they're asking for. They're asking for transparency about how the system works generally, not necessarily how every input led to every exact output. So it is true that AI systems can be somewhat opaque. It's not true that all software systems are not opaque, if that makes sense.
Fair point there. So much of it goes back to really good, sensible development, doesn't it? The development principles. I had a hand here, and we'll take one more. There's in a white top. We'll do both questions for the panel, and then that will be it for today.
Hello, this is Claire James. I worked on the IEEE 7003 standard on algorithmic bias considerations. I know Adam a little bit. So we tried really hard to be truly international in the development. We had people from all continents working on the standard on bias, but there was still a stronger voice from the United States, Canada, and Europe. So I'm asking ISO and Sentinel-elect, do you feel that you represent global majority and it's truly international, or is it just an intention? And if you did achieve that, how did you do it?
Thank you, and they'll also take this question.
Second question. So, Jo Whitehead here from Oxford Internet Institute. My question is, DCIT recently commissioned some work on the AI assurance market as a whole from Frontier, and one of their key conclusions was that it was constrained quite significantly, both constrained in demand for AI assurance services, but also constrained in supply of AI assurance providers. And my question to the panel is that your experience? And if it is, what would it take to unlock that market potential?
Two really good questions. Who would like to start?
If I may, maybe to react on the question regarding what I would call the alignment between the different SDOs and ISO and IEC. for instance, between CEN and ISO and between CENELEC and IEC, we do have agreements ensuring that we do not duplicate the work, ensuring that we rationalize resources, because it's all about resources in our world today, meaning that if something is good at international level, for the European market, we can adopt it at, almost identically. Now, of course, for the AI, of course, let's say the regulatory frame is different, or we have like European specialties, I don't know how to say. We can still adopt international standards and then adjust, align, remove pages, add pages to the international standards to have an EN ISO version, which is a little bit, the European version, which is a little bit different than the international version. Why I'm referring to ISO and IEC is because IEEE, I believe, have partnership, I don't know the exact name, with ISO and IEC, and we do believe that there is conversion in that sense.
Thank you. I think what I might do is actually go down the line this way for just kind of last comments on the questions, or another point you might want to land in the minds before we head off.
I can only really comment on the point relating to demand in the marketplace, and the TIC industry more generally is a very successful sector. It's about a $250 billion industry on a global basis, and there's certainly capacity that covers many different areas. But we're at just at the very beginning of the artificial intelligence assurance opportunity, and supply is affected by demand, and so there isn't perhaps as much capacity in delivery of AI assurance because there isn't yet the demand within the marketplace for this, because the standards are developing, the techniques are developing, the supply chain demands or regulatory requirements that will push this assurance down into the marketplaces is still at the very beginning. So it will come. I'm very confident that in all the conversations I have with the TIC industry CEOs, they're very focused on this area, and we'll see that capacity build up. In the same way that we've seen that with cybersecurity, if you think back 10, 15 years ago, it was still a very new sector, and now it's a multi-billion-dollar industry of cyber assurance. And so it will come. It's just at the very beginning, I think.
Yeah.
And Stacie, I might change tack and go to the question around diversity of representation. And I think it's a very accurate observation, but also I think there's an opportunity here for countries like Australia. So we undertake a significant amount of capacity building, both from the Australian government and also through the independent national standards body, Standards Australia, working with our neighbours among the Pacific Island countries to help to build their institutional capacity on standards and conformance. And I think there's certainly a lot more work to do, but that's certainly a major priority and focus in this area to help to bring those voices to the table. And a second point on that is also, even within existing national mirror committees and participation at the domestic level, really significant efforts to increase the diversity of representation on those committees, not just expertise from different fields and civil society and end users, but also the backgrounds of those individuals as well, to make sure it's truly representative, in our case of Australian society, but also for any country around the world to have that breadth of representation at the domestic level as well.
Thank you. Adam.
We're running out of time, so I'll just try and tackle the bias question. So I think I agree with everything that's been said. One difference in ISO, IEC and CEN/CENELEC is the one vote, one country principle. So although obviously there are economies and countries that can't send as many experts and participate as much, they can vote no on a standard. My personal experience developing standards on bias internationally was that I had to work with all countries around the world and people who had very, very different values to perhaps values that UK experts or European experts might have. But we developed a standard on unwanted bias that everybody agreed on by writing down all the things that we do and the processes we put in place, but stepping back from actual value judgments about what was fairness or anything like that. You may have also heard me say earlier that international standards are the priority, but you may also wonder why there's CEN/CENELEC doing European standards. That may help answer the question, because we've got to wrap some of that international work into European and regional values in order to meet the public policy objectives of particular legislative initiatives.
Thank you. I think that comes with a really important aspect of standards development, which is the consensus part of it, consensus-based standards, and making sure that all of those voices are heard. Just very quickly on the kind of the ecosystem and demand side, I think you're right. There's kind of failure at both ends at the moment. I also wonder if a lot of this is research and development is done by SMEs or other people that might not be familiar with the kind of accreditation, conformity assessment type environment, and how do we embed good practice, doing good software development, good data quality assessments kind of from the outset, and just embed that and have that be a part of the way in which the AI ecosystem works. And I think there's a role that all of our organizations play in making that just part of the day-to-day of AI. That brings us to the close of this session. I think it's been really clear to me that through this work, we'll be driving the confidence that we need in AI to actually then adopt it and kind of get that reward from it that we're all looking for. Thank you very much to my panelists who have come far and wide to join us here today, and a special thanks to AI UK for sharing their stage with the AI Standards Hub Global Summit. Thank you.